Hey everybody, back here at the shop. Thought I'd give you a little bit of update what's going on and share some more tips on building gassers or building any kind of car, honestly. Most of the stuff that I'm doing, you guys can apply to bracket cars or whatever. You know, basically we're building 850 certified cars, so you know, most of this applies other than the front suspension. And I've got one coming up here shortly, strut front end I'm going to put on a Vega that I'm going to share with you guys too, so you can see all that stuff. So I'm going to show you around Henry J number 1. I've been fiddling with that, trying to finish it up. The car went to a paint shop, sat there for 8 or 9 months, didn't get touched, so it came back home. And in the process, when it was going there, the guy was in a hurry to get the car, so I still had to disassemble it and finish weld some of the bottom stuff. Because like I said in previous videos, I'll build a basic chassis and get it all done and completely welded together so it doesn't move around anymore, and then I start mounting parts and pieces. So, you know, pull it off the jig, flip it around, weld it up, and then I mount the seats and all the other stuff. And that's what I want to talk about today, is that process a little bit. Maybe I can help you out with some of that, and then show you, you know, a different perspective of these cars. You can look at the bottom close, maybe that'll help you with some ideas there, what's going on with what I do. So here goes, show you what's happening. And sorry about the last video making everybody seasick. I didn't realize until after it was all done how bad I moved the camera around, but I'm carrying it in my hand. You know, I'm a low-tech guy. I don't have any vibration-proof cameras or none of that stuff. So, and as I said before, I don't edit these. I just post them so you can see them, and you can keep what you want, throw away the rest, but I'm just trying to share information. So here you go. I'm going to show you what's happening. Okay, this is Henry J number 1, and I've got it up on its side. Because typically all I do is I set it on 3 jack stands on its side, and I'll weld as much as I can weld everywhere, and then I flip it over on the other side and do that. And then I'll set for a day and walk around again. Do not just rush it and think you're done, because you're gonna miss something. I'm telling you, it happens a lot. And I even did it on this car. I walked away and looked at it the next day, and it's like, holy moly, I missed this and this. So, you know, just little stuff, but you know, finish welds are important. So, and then cleaning up. This car's ready to go to powder coater. And as I mentioned in previous videos, I MIG weld the 2x3 tubing because it's mild steel. Like the ladder bar brackets are welded on with the MIG welder. They're mild steel. But tabs and stuff like that, I TIG weld all that stuff. Like these brackets here from Speedway Motors, they're zinc plated. You know, I grind all the zinc plating off of them and everything, and I MIG weld them on because they're so cruddy. If you try to TIG weld these things on, it's just, man, it's horrible. And the front ones are the same way. They do that gold plating on them, so I MIG weld them on. But everything else, like these joints here, you know, they're all TIG welded. I TIG weld the floors in. Therein, that gets me to what I wanted to talk about for this trip, okay? I'm going to show you over here real quick. Try not to make seasick. I always make a checklist, and I've done this enough time that most of it's stuck in my head, and I'm hoping you can see my checklist there. But things that need to be welded on the car need to be built and fabricated before it goes to paint or powder coat. This is important. And what I'm hoping you'll do from this video is look at this video real slow at the tabs and brackets that I've got on it, you know, and realize that once you get this thing powder coated or painted, and then you got to weld more brackets on it, you're just messing up the paint job. So if you go through and do simple things like, you know, I got a thing in there for an air tire gauge. I mean, it's better than bouncing around on the floor, you know, and a helmet hook, and you know, ignition panels, all that stuff. You know, if you look at the back here quick, fuel pump tab, I told you about that. This is like the bolt of holly on there, but he's going to run one of the Holley EFI style pumps on it, so I built an adapter bracket. Battery box, you know, fuel cell tabs. I talked a little bit about the fuel filter mount, that's right there. I put weight bar tabs up here in front of the rear axle, that's where I could get them in this car. Harness tabs, unless you're wrapping around, you can see them in there. I mean, there's my helmet hook, you know, just so the helmet's not rolling around on the floor, you know. Tire pressure gauge mount's pretty simple. I just bend a piece of 1/4 inch tubing 180 degrees and tack weld it on the back of the hoop somehow. This is on the passenger side, but usually I'll put them behind the driver's seat. So I think the reason why I did it this way is just the way the car was positioned at the time. So anywho, it's not on the floor. You know, I put my ignition panel here, and you have to mount that stuff where the driver can reach it. I knew that could happen here. I typically will mount the seat first, as I've explained before, and I'll show you some of that stuff. Tachometer mount, okay? That's right there in the A-pillar bar. That's important, especially like if you're running a manual transmission car. Some of these groups like Sega, they don't want shift lights or nothing else, so you have to be able to see the tack. So I'm screwing it down to the dashboard or clamping it on the steering column. When you have to look at it, it don't work. You have to put the tack right. It's got to be right in your line of sight, so you're not turning your head or looking, because when you're driving, the key thing is to go straight down the track. I mean, I've seen guys, and it's called peer and steer. You look over to the right, and all of a sudden you're pulling the steering wheel to the right and wiggling down the track. So yeah, got to be careful of that. My seat mount, so you saw the seat in the other car. This one here I used 3/4 inch tubing in it, but the other car I used 1/2 inch just to try to get the tabs a little wider. And I use a gusseted tab on there, those trick tabs, and I always weld a nut on the back side, because there's nothing harder than trying to hold a nut back there, you know, and thread the bolt into it and everything else. Same way in the back mounts. I mean, you can see these here, of course it's on 90 degrees, but I do the same thing there. Weld trick tabs in, and of course this car's got 2 seats, so it's got mounts on both sides. This little tab here, for instance, that's a tab for a fan. I didn't lightweight it or nothing. The car's going to be pretty light, but you know, one of those little truck fans goes in here to keep the driver, you know, air moving around. And then the 3 tabs up there for the ignition panel, okay, and then these little dealios here. Hopefully you can see this. That's for a starter button. You know, remote starter button underneath the hood, so you can, you know, crank the engine over from out here when you're working on it, like adjusting valves or whatever. These things are a time saver. Or if you're changing a converter, you can just reach up there and press that button. What I do there, it's a 5/8 stainless washer that I weld on the piece of 058 tubing, you know, make it about 1 inch long, and then weld it into a joint somewhere. Another very important thing, that little tab right there, that's a ground tab for the ignition panel, okay? Then you come over here, I've got a ground tab for the engine. I try to put a lot of ground tabs in. I don't weld bolts to the chassis, because I've seen guys bust the bolts off, and then you're just trying to fight it. This way, if you use a tab, like with a star washer to ground it, if the bolt breaks, you just throw it away and get another one. You're not out anything. You don't have to re-weld to the chassis or anything else. These little dealios right here, I got one there and one there. Those are mid mounts for the back of the engine. And on a car like this, I'm going to walk you over there and show you real quick. I use like a manual transmission car. I just weld the ears on the mid plate, as you can see here, the block saver, and that's the mid mount in the car. So, I mean, people might have seen my engine cross member there earlier and thinking, man, that ain't gonna hold it, but really the mid plate does all the work. And at that point, all the front mounts are doing is holding the engine up in the air in the front. So, back to the car, stuff like this. That's a tie down hook. Okay? You need those. You'd be wrapping the straps around the axles or whatever, and you don't want to do that. Then these two little tabs right here, this is like a radiator mount. I always make the radiator mounts removable, so it's just easier to get the engine in and out of the car. If you go welding uprights in there and you got to lift the engine over the top of them, that's a pain in the butt. So 4/4 inch bolts and the entire radiator assembly comes out and the front end's wide open. So this little deal here, that's the clutch stop. It hits on the cross shaft for the clutch. I mean, this is where it will come out. And then I put a piece in here like 3/8 studded rod with a T on the end of it, and that's the actual stop for the clutch pedal. You know, I don't know, this little deal here, if you can see that, I got that welded right there. That's actually for an automatic transmission shifter mount. I mount them below the floor and I use a quick pin in them so you can get the shifter completely out of the way, and or leave it hooked right to the transmission if you're pulling it out. You just pull that pin out and lay it down, unplug the wiring from the neutral safety, and you can leave the shifter hooked right to the transmission if you're doing a converter change or something like that. And as you can see, you know, the middle floors come out, all that stuff, so it makes it pretty wide open. This is how I mount my throttle pedal. It's just a piece of 1/2 inch tubing with a 3/8 bolt tack welded in it, and then the piece on the top there, that's the pedal stop there. Imperative on a throttle, I don't care what any of these gasser groups say, you need something to keep from over centering the carburetor. Because I had a buddy of mine that passed away from not having a pedal stop, believe it or not. He mashed the throttle down on his dragster, it stuck wide open because he bent the throttle shaft in the carburetor, mashing on it so hard, crashed the car and killed himself. So bad deal. So pedal stops, super important. Pedal stops for everything. The brake should have a stop on it. To keep it from over centering, because back in the day there was several dragster builders out there that would build cars with short ratio pedals, and the pads would wear out and the pedal would over center and lock down on the floor. Super bad deal. So you just want it to travel, to work the brakes really good. It's full travel, but you don't want it to go over center. So I'll show you here my master cylinder mount. I use the Wilwood bolt-on master cylinders. That's why it's got an oval shaped hole. And the hole's long enough so you can get the master cylinder off the car too when you have to change or anything like that. Another reason why I like those Wilwood master cylinders is they've got outlets on both sides, which makes it awesome for plumbing. In this car, I don't know, you can't see it in this one, show you, I typically try to run brake lines through the frame rails. There's a route up here, you can see that. When you're up front alongside the engine or anything, I try to run the brake lines through the frame. So on this one I'll probably have to drill a couple more holes, but anyways, diagonals, like I said, you can get a little bit better view of how I build the bottom of the car in the relationship. There's the cross member, and in my next video I'm going to show you how I locate that cross member of the car in relationship to the ladder bars. So I use, like when I do my frames, I use like a fish plate on the outside, TIG weld them together. The frames I TIG weld the joints like this because this rail wasn't long enough, so I'll TIG weld those together. I chamfer them and TIG weld them, and then I'll put a fish plate on them. A lot of guys will do it on the inside, and that's fine too, but you can't just butt weld the frame sections. You have to either fish plate them or you have to put a gusset on the inside. And you can see, like I was talking about flipping it and welding it, there's one of the seat belt tabs. I weld on both sides. Yeah, if you weld it on one side, you're asking for a problem. So, and look at the nut, okay? I use it's like a 1/2 inch fine threaded nut there, and I put a little tack on each side to make it easy, but I only put a little tack. I don't get carried away, because if you ever have to take that nut off of there, you can stick a wrench on it and bust it off and start over. That, you're not ending the world with that stuff. So
I mean, over here on my seatbelt tabs. Those nuts are unbelievably hard to hold when you're trying to bolt your belts in, so just tacking them in makes a world of difference. When you get your car back from the powder coater, say you get it all cleaned up, I go through and I'll hit it with an 80 grit, 2-inch roll lock and knock some of the weld spatter off and stuff like that. And I'll only have weld spatter where I MIG welded it. Get it all cleaned up. Take a tap and chase the threads of every nut. Anywhere you've got threads, chase them with a tap, because you go to try to put a bolt in a powder coated hole and it will stick every time. So I just wanted to share a little bit of this info. Like I say, build you a checklist. I'm in the process now. I'm gonna make one I can print out with everything on it, but you can see, I've written this not in order, seat belts and shifter and seats and steering column and all that stuff. You got a checklist, you ain't missing anything. Look at other cars. I mean, you can look at this one and write down, what I've done and make yourself a small checklist. But man, this stuff is so important when you're building it. I've watched, I like watching YouTube videos, but I see these guys on there. There's a guy I watch up north that is really good at sheet metal work. I mean, he's basically beating it over a rock, but he's good at it. He's done it a long time. But he's building himself a car, and he built the basic chassis, and he's painted it already. So now everywhere he paints it, he's got to grind off paint, and then you got to go through and touch that stuff up. Then it just looks like Fido's butt when you do it. So, hey, and don't get me wrong, there's times that you have to do stuff like that, but try to minimize it, try to make your job easier in the end. So anyways, one other thing, you can look here, like that little hole there's a rear body mount. I got a nut tacked in there. Not that you'll ever remove it, but boy, it makes it nice to remove the body when you're doing this. Because I've done enough of them where you got to crawl inside there and weld, and I'm too old and inflexible to do that stuff anymore. So spring cups, they're mounted as far out as I can get them. Like I said before, the wider you can get your suspension mounting points, the more stable the car will be. And you'll notice the frame rails don't line up, even though I could have lined them up and made it life a little bit easier for me. I want everything as wide as I can get it to make it as stable as I can get it. So, and other than that, like I say, I'm still working on the Henry J. I've been fighting back problems. So I built I think if you can see through there, I built the ladder bars for Jerry Dean's car. They're ready to go. I'm gonna change up my ladder bar brackets a little bit, cut them out, and probably start working on that next week some. I want to get a little farther along with the Henry J and get the body completely mounted, but doing that. And then Ronnie's been busting buggy on the 50 Chevy. He's got all the brakes done and most of the lines, and I think he's got to put a fuel line on it yet. And of course we're going to put the clutch and transmission back in it. And like we're just plugging along here. Anyways, I thought I'd share that with you guys. And forgive me, I've been trying to post videos, but my interweb is like horrible. So there'll be days that I can't post them for a day or two because I just don't have enough interweb here. I'm right on the outer limits of having good service. So I'm doing my best to keep you guys updated on what's going on and, more tips for you. So thanks for watching. I'll post another video here in about a week or so.